Lombard, Executive Vice President of Innovation for the Arizona Commerce Authority, and welcome to the ACA Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective. We are going on week 11, day 2. It's July 7th, and we're really excited to have some really great presenters from Upfront. Matt and Tiffany are going to really talk about sales, and I think it's really all on our mind right now and something that's going to be very, very helpful. Before we get into that, I'd just like to, again, thank all of our community partners, including Upfront, but everyone has been so wonderful and participative. We could not have done this without them and continue to do this. So thank you so much. Many of you have participated in these. If you haven't, this is designed for a daily boot camp and touching base with all of our small businesses with various topics. This week we've had some really great topics, and next week we also have really good ones. We're going to be running this through the end of July, and then have some exciting news and that we'll share with all the companies as we move this program forward. So the Resource Collective is online. You could check out our website at Arizona Commerce Authority, azcommerce.com. If you go to our COVID resource page, you'll see this prominently located there. Again, there's resources, all of the videos and all of the presentations are collected there, and you'll be able to review that as you like. The Resource Collective is really coming together. It's probably one of our most accomplished events since we've done this in the last 10 weeks. We have a number of resources and documents and presentations and videos, so please do check that out. This week we've had some really great topics. Yesterday we did a PPP program update. There's some interesting news on that, so we'll share that briefly. Today we're going to really focus on sales, and Upfront's going to help us with the concept of stop losing sales during COVID and during our transition here. Tomorrow we have a great session from our manufacturing extension program, MEP, talking about manufacturing for small businesses. And then on Thursday, re-energizing your business growth model. And then on Friday, navigating your business through COVID disruption. So we've really got some really great topics and great speakers, so please join us. If you have not heard already, PPP has been extended, so you can still apply for a PPP loan. This has been extended from June 29th all the way through now August 8th is the date that you can apply. There's still over $110 billion remaining, so please do apply. If you have any questions, please let us know. We can set you up with those that are still issuing loans that we know of that are processing them very quickly. So in Arizona, we've had almost 80,000 companies and over $8.5 billion for the state of Arizona. It's been absolutely fantastic. So we really do appreciate everyone's hard work on that. Also just want to mention to leverage other programs and other partners of ours, as well as their resource sites. Of course, our SBDC partners, navigating all of their information is super important. Also for workforce, Arizona at Work, there is absolutely phenomenal information about work if you're trying to locate employees or find additional employment as well. And then of course our manufacturing extension program, as we've mentioned. And then of course Arizona Together .org, which is a universal site for the state and for the governor's office, incredible resource and guidelines, and really keeping up to date on all the information that is ever changing these weeks. So please do check out those sites. Also additional resources, as I've mentioned, on our resource guide. We have guides for almost every single industry and product and service. So please do check those out as well. And just stay informed and stay connected with us. So today, I'm really excited to have Matt Robertson and Tiffany Harris from Upfront share with us their tactics and strategies on sales, and really, really great information. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to Matt and Tiffany. So welcome.
Thank you.
And you guys can share your screen when you're ready.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump on that right now. All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
It's great.
Perfect. Oops, I apologize, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Bring this up. So thank you all for joining us today. We're gonna do this a little bit different style boot camp. Hopefully it's not gonna feel like a real boot camp. You guys aren't gonna have to work too hard here. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'm actually gonna be speaking with Matt about maximizing sales, service, and safety. the three things everyone is really concerned about right now. We'll also be sharing the most common business problems we hear from leaders across the country. Although we work mostly with consumer-facing companies, these problems are highly relevant to most businesses. The Upfront leadership team has owned and operated thousands of businesses collectively, and we still own consumer-facing businesses today. The things we're going to talk about, we've done. So we know that these things do work and they do make a difference, as we are also discovering the new normal, just as you guys are. We'll provide some very specific things that you can do immediately to drive results in your business. And at the end, we're going to be very happy to answer any questions you have. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So Matt, I am sure everyone is dying to know, why should we listen to you?
Well, I think that's a valid question. I hear that from my wife as well. So thank you for starting us off with that one. I would say that folks should listen because we're you. We're in your world. We own multiple businesses, as Tiffany said. We have hundreds of employees and clients. And we've also built a lot of businesses across multiple industries and brands. So we've experienced all of the same challenges, and the same things have kept us up at night. And that experience has led us to start building what we call kind of no BS systems designed to make businesses more resilient.
Do you find any common themes across the business owners that you talk to?
Yeah, we do. So every owner we work with is dealing with the same core problems, and they really fit into 4 buckets: performance, people, growth, and risk. And that's especially true in the current crisis that we're all facing. And those are recurring themes because in most cases as leaders, we work on the wrong problem. You're probably familiar with the book Good to Great. And in that book, Jim Collins illustrates this perfectly with the doom loop. And the doom loop says that in business, we almost always start with results, and we're prone to change it up when results aren't good. But people hate change. And changing people is really hard. So change rarely improves long-term results because you keep losing momentum. Einstein said current problems are the result of current thinking. So we have to solve the right problem.
So I guess the million-dollar question actually is, what is the right problem?
Well, all businesses, especially service businesses, fundamentally work this way. We spend a ton of time and energy preparing to sell our products and services to customers. That includes the plan that we need our people to execute, things like the new safety protocols that everyone has to follow. And then we spend even more time digging into mountains of data to figure out how we can get better. We look at our metrics and P&Ls. There's an unending amount of information. But in the end, our employees are usually the ones who are responsible for the last mile of our entire business model. And that is the moment that the customer decides to buy or to stay with us. And that final moment essentially depends on our lowest paid employees choosing whether or not to execute our plan. So if you want to solve the right problem, you have to dig into those choices.
So what do we know about those choices that you're talking about?
Well, we know that they impact your sales today. They impact your online reputation tomorrow, which impacts future new guests and sales forever. This is especially true when it comes to safety in this new world, because businesses will be the ones held accountable when customers or employees get sick. We did a consumer survey recently, and 56% of consumers said that they would sue a business if they were exposed to or contracted COVID after dining or shopping there, even though they have no way of knowing that they actually got it there.
So the stakes have never been higher than they are right now, and the consumers obviously clearly are telling us that. What can we do to affect their choices?
Yeah, so because we recognize that employees and their decision-making at work is so important, we try lots of stuff. The business and leadership books tell us to start with culture. But culture is an abstract concept. It's more of an outcome than a strategy. You can spend tons of time and money on culture and not see it in your results. I have the scar tissue from a $25,000 employee picnic to prove it, if anybody ever wants to hear about that. most performance problems at work really boil down to execution. How many times have you asked yourself, why can't they just follow the process? If only they would follow the process. So to that end, we do more stuff like more training, conference calls, meetings, hiring. But in the end, we usually revert back to the same two things, which is we either do the work ourselves, which is not sustainable and super frustrating when you look at your labor costs, or we apply accountability, which usually means discipline, which these days just ends up driving people to a different job, especially millennials and Gen Z. But none of that stuff solves the right problem.
All right. I feel like you're jangling us over a cliff here, leaving us hanging. What's the punchline?
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I'm prone to theatrics. In reality, 70% of what your employees actually do at work is based on one thing, and that is the feedback that they receive from their manager.
Okay, I want to make sure everyone got that. You may want to write this down. So you're telling us that the feedback that a manager is giving, or not giving actually in a lot of cases, has the highest impact on execution and performance. Do I have that right?
Exactly right.
Wow. Okay, so where does a typical manager or owner get the tools for that job?
Yeah, that's true. That can be the hardest part of the job, but it doesn't have to be. The question we need to be asking is, how do we make our most important business processes into habits so our people follow them automatically?
Okay, so we're talking about habits here. We all know they are notoriously hard to form. They are even harder to get other people to form. So why is that?
Well, let's look at what we know about behavioral science. So all humans need the right conditions to create good habits. So some examples. Think about if you've ever had a time where you tried to lose weight. It takes time to do that. And the feedback that we get is either slow because our body's not responding to our weight loss efforts, or it's negative, usually delivered to us by the scale. That slow and negative feedback ultimately causes us to give up. Think about New Year's resolutions. They're usually private, secret to us. We don't get any feedback because of that. And so what's happening on February 1st?
Give up.
So contrast that to a sports team. Clear objectives. Those objectives and their commitment to those objectives are public, they're visible, and because they have coaching, there's constant feedback, which creates the habits that are necessary to win. As human beings, and especially as workers, we need repetition in order to achieve mastery. That is why change, as you saw in the doom loop, can be so damaging. And subconsciously, we're all wired the same way. So if we work the way our brains work, we can build good habits much faster.
Okay, I could be way off here, but I am guessing not many people have expertise in neuropsychology. Not thinking probably that's the case. So how do you implement this type of management without that level of education and knowledge?
Well, it really all starts with having a system so that you can sustain it. I love the Deming quote about systems. We often fault people for a systems problem. And so that's why we developed a framework for building habits that really any leader can use to get started down this path, whether you own the entire company or supervise a single department.
Okay, so tell us about this framework.
Sure. Well, workplace habits require two main conditions: clarity and coaching. So for everyone listening, just ask yourself this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how certain are you that your frontline employees know exactly what to do in your critical customer moments, those moments that matter the most? That clarity starts with expectations. But we don't get expectations right all the time, because expectations are the most important actions, behaviors that are required to achieve the results you want, whether it's sales or service or anything that you do. Your expectations need to be explicit so that employees know exactly what they are supposed to do. And you cannot expect them to figure it out. Hear that all the time in business. And we cannot expect them to think like owners because they're not, especially if they make $15 an hour. It's not a fair ask. So one key distinction here, though, is numbers are not expectations, they're outcomes. So your job is to clarify the behaviors that employees must do consistently in order to hit those numbers. For example, we'll say to an employee, you need to sell 20 widgets this month. And that's an outcome. It's a result of doing the right things throughout the month. Your job is to clarify the actions that are necessary for them to sell those 20 widgets.
Okay, so that makes sense. Once we have established that clarity, what's the next step?
Well, you need to make sure that these behavioral expectations are embedded in all of your management systems. So think about the tools that you already have in place. You've got job descriptions, job postings, interviews, reviews. All of those tools need to have the same clarity embedded in them so that you can create real accountability. And then the management team needs to master what we call true coaching in order to turn those expectations into habits. And when you're able to put all this stuff together, you end up with vastly improved results in your business.
Okay, so every leader that I've spoken to, I'm sure you've spoken to as well, they say they do coach their people. So what's the difference with true coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. So business has misapplied the term coaching. When it comes to employees, coaching usually means performance reviews and corrective feedback. But what we're doing in a review is not coaching. Reviews are like forensic science, where we use infrequent meetings to review numbers, try to figure out what happened, and then offer some sort of vague intuition-based praise or discipline. They're very frustrating for managers, and they are psychologically demotivating for employees. True coaching is a continuous process of observing behaviors and then providing balanced, real-time feedback in order to develop skills and achieve goals just like a sports coach would.
Okay, well, everything you just said, it sounds like a basis for a masterclass in people management, which is fantastic, but we're limited on time. So can we quickly summarize the 5 steps of the true coaching process with some real practical examples?
Sure. So starting with specific feedback is based on observed behaviors. So if you think about it in our normal business leadership life, we'll usually say things to an employee like, hey, great job, you made that sale. But what were the actions that you're trying to reinforce that you want them to repeat? So what you want to say when you observe an employee make a sale is you want to say that right there, that was exactly right. You followed the sales process perfectly. Thank you. Took 3 extra seconds, but it was crystal clear. The second one is balanced, and that means a blend of recognition and corrective feedback. So not to geek out on the science too much here, but the science tells us that people need 3 times more recognition in order to create good habits. So if they don't get that, they think that they're not good at the job, which causes them to disengage and leave. Real time means giving feedback when the action happens, not weeks later. We like to say that feedback has a 24-hour expiration date, especially if it's corrective. Even 10 minutes a day is enough. And you've heard this before, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. But we only usually write up the bad stuff in business. So when was the last time that you wrote up an employee for doing something right? You start doing that, it changes everything. And if you don't make this process continuous, just like a sports coach, employee behavior won't be continuous either. So consider this your primary job when it comes to managing people, because it has the highest return on investment and it makes everybody's job a lot easier, especially yours.
Okay, so in that you did mention disengagement, I'm sorry. What does a disengaged employee cost the average business today?
Well, it depends on how many employees you replace.
Of course.
The service industry average is 100% annualized turnover. And that includes brands like the Four Seasons and Ritz-Carlton. Fast food is often 200 or 300%. So just think about that. That means that they're turning over their entire team 3 times a year.
A lot of training.
It's a lot of everything and zero continuity. So if you think about that as a customer, a person who shops and dines places, it starts to make sense why you have such inconsistent experiences. And Cornell University studied the cost of turnover for an hourly frontline worker specifically. And the average is $5,800, of which $3,000 is just from lost sales from the customers that they choose not to give the best experience to while they're in some transition out of your business. So imagine what we would do, that $5,800 number. Imagine if we saw that on our P&L as a line item. Problem is, this is filtered throughout your P&L, and so you can't really see it. But if we saw that, we would go after it.
It would be amazing to have that whole number right there in front of your face on a regular basis.
Yep.
Make a difference. So it sounds like that the method of managing people really has the broadest impact.
Yeah, it does. Just to reiterate, I mean, since 70% of what employees do at work is based on manager feedback, when you get that right, a lot of things start to fall into place. We call it the results loop, which is kind of the opposite of the doom loop that we talked about earlier. Consistency breeds confidence, which creates momentum. So when you start managing this way, you'll see performance improve almost immediately. Stable employees need less training. They're less likely to engage in high-risk behavior, much more likely to adopt and embrace the safety protocols that we all have to follow now. And that lower turnover, as you can see, will save you thousands of dollars in training and lost sales. And then you can take that extra profit to fund your growth. And right now, if you're in a situation where profitability is being squeezed and you're not yet thinking about growing your business, just the ability to hold on to what profit you can generate using this method is going to potentially be the difference between staying in business and not.
Absolutely. So if the employee stays longer, then you as the owner don't have to worry as much about finding the good people either, that diamond in the rough out there.
Yeah, we hear that a lot from folks who say, oh, I just want to hire a whole bunch of these rock stars. And if you think about it, it's not really possible or sustainable to do that. What you really need is consistency across your organization. A bunch of really great utility infielders can make up for a very predictable and stable business. So retention really is your best recruiting strategy. High performers tend to attract high performers, and the opposite is also true. So if you allow mediocrity to permeate your organization, it's going to continue. So if you manage this way, you end up with a culture of positive accountability that yields vastly more consistent results. And quite frankly, you'll just enjoy your business a lot more.
Absolutely. Well, I know I appreciate all these great insights. I'm sure everyone else does on this complex problem that most businesses are facing today, we're facing a year ago, and may continue to face. Is there any final thoughts that you have on this before we open it up for questions?
Yeah, I mean, just think about the things that if I were watching that I would write down. I would write down the number 70%. Because if 70% of what your employees do is based on the feedback that they either get or don't get from their manager, especially if that's you, you have to get that part right, or all of your other efforts are going to be less effective. 70%. And that starts with your employees and managers knowing exactly what they're expected to do and how to do it. So if you've got in your head that you want people to do things a certain way, the only way they're ever going to do that is if you make sure they know that and you stay consistent in that direction. They also need the opportunity to turn these expectations into habits, which we've all heard that it takes 21 days to make a habit. It actually takes 66 days at least to create and lock in a habit. And so 66 days from now is what you need to be looking at and thinking, how much can I embrace this management style in the next 66 days. Speaking from a lot of years of hard-won experience, a lot of gray hair, don't go back to managing your team the old way, because it just won't ever work, no matter how hard you try. And I say that because I've done that. When you try to solve the same problems over and over and over again, it will make you crazy, and it will give you lots of white hair. I'd also like to say, just in final thought from me, thank you to the business community and to the Arizona Department of Commerce for the opportunity to share these insights with the community today. It's an honor for us to be able to support fellow business owners and leaders on this journey. It is enormously challenging. We need all the help we can get, and really hope that this was helpful for all of you today.
Fantastic. Thank you. It's a lot of information, a lot of really, really great insights like we talked about. It could seem like this is really a lot of work. I promise you it's not, as long as you have the right tools in place. And we're here to help you, as Matt said, so we can help you do that quickly and painlessly in the businesses. So you can go to our website, it's listed on your screen, reach out to us directly with any additional questions. I apologize, I have a small puppy that decided she wanted to start barking just right then. I got through the whole thing. So with that, let's go ahead and take some questions.
I have a quick one.
Yes.
If you guys could explain what has been the most predominant aspect that has worked and not worked during the COVID process. What's been some of the big examples of successes and pitfalls that you've seen over the last 3 months in our current environment?
So I would offer this because we've experienced it firsthand as we reopened our own locations. Most businesses, when they reopened, kind of accepted, even embraced that it was going to be very chaotic for a while, that there was lots of uncertainty and bunches of changing rules and all these new things people had to do. And we talked about this earlier, people do not like change at all. And so the best thing you could possibly do, the thing that we see work the best in every business that does it, is to try to provide a sense of consistency and continuity, to bring down the this is chaos mentality, so that people can kind of settle into a routine. And if you pair that routine to two things, your most important business processes and the safety standards that exist, then it just makes that the normal way of working. And so your customers have a better experience and revenue flows and everything kind of starts to click.
Yeah, and that's also challenging if things do continue to change. But as long as those remain the constants, then you could focus on those. Yeah,
and Andy, I would add one more thing to that. One of the things that's important in this style of managing people, as you can see, it's a very transparent, candid way of managing. There's no secrets really, because why? We're all trying to do better at work. And so being honest with your employees that things will continue to change constantly as far as guidelines changing and evolving. No one's ever been in this situation before. But if we're in it together and we're committed to still delivering a great experience to our customers and being as consistent as we can, then those changes are a little bit easier to handle when they come.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're looking at very closely is there, first of all, we know the fact that there is no playbook for this. There is no prescription. We don't have the precedent to actually go back and write the rules. So a lot of that is on the fly. But if you were to attempt to structure some playbook, structure some element of these guiding posts, what would you establish? What would be the foundations of that? I know obviously the management of the people and the repetitive habits, but I'd like to dive into that a little bit, because I think there exists the opportunity to have a playbook, even though there is not one today, but those standards that we can maybe keep focusing on.
Yeah, so it's a good question. And to me, it all goes back to the playbook that existed for that business prior to COVID, because the majority of the job, whether you're wearing a face mask or a face shield or maintaining distancing or working from home, the majority of your job is not adapting to CDC guidelines. The majority of your job is doing your job. delivering the products and services and the brand promise from your business to your customer. And so the better that playbook is defined, the more clarity there is for an employee to be able to consistently and rigorously do their job. The CDC guidelines and the adaptations that we have to make end up being kind of an adjunct to that. And they're much easier for employees to embrace because they're falling back to a predictable position. So for me, Andy, the playbook really is the business's playbook first, and the CDC guidelines kind of go on top of that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So the existing playbook that is your customer focus, your brand promise, your service delivery, and then map that to any requirements that are needed from a CDC perspective and others, and you start to adjust that playbook as you move forward. And know that those could change as you start to move forward as well.
Yeah, but the nice thing is the business playbook usually doesn't. There's usually a theme that goes through that. But what's happening right now is that this kind of chaotic moment with COVID is exposing so much of the business, the parts of our businesses that were not properly codified and clear to our employees. And so it just turns into madness when they're trying to do all of this at the same time.
That's great. I love it.
Hey, Matt, to kind of go on with that, we have a question in the same thought process here. So regarding the structure, strategy, and culture of the organization, which component of the three would you say is the independent variable? Or is it an independent variable and two dependents? Are they all independent based on the organization?
You said structure, strategy, and
culture.
Culture.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're certainly interconnected. I wouldn't say that any of those are independent because no matter what, they're going to affect the major constituents that are part of your business, which are your employees, your customers, your shareholders. And so all of those things need appropriate airtime. But to expound on a point we made earlier, culture, while it's very possible to try to define the type of culture that you want, we really define culture as the things that your employees do when no one's looking.
Right.
And so that requires the clarity and the strategy and the consistency that are necessary in order to create that outcome.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, if anyone listening today does one thing, what should that one thing be after leaving here today?
Well, the smallest first step for me is the clarity step. Go back and look at your job description for your frontline employees, your customer facing folks, and just see if that job description is in fact representative of the what they're supposed to do and the how they're supposed to do it. Or is it just a duties list? Because that's where it all starts. That's your jumping off point or reference point. So take a look at that. And also write down your employees' goals on the job description and see, okay, if they do the things that are listed on this job description, will they hit those goals? And most of the time when we do that analysis for a company, those things are completely disconnected. So that's a great starting point. And the second thing I would do is just go observe your people. I don't care whether they work in a warehouse or whether they work at a front desk. If you just spend a little bit of time in their natural habitat watching them work, you will be amazed how many things that they do right. And you'll be able to thank them for those things, and they will feel appreciated and motivated in a very different way than they have before.
And that appreciation and communication goes a long way. I mean, we know that, we see that.
And it's free. You don't have to have a rewards program. They don't have to build up points to earn a clock radio on some website. It just depends on what you say to them and your presence. And if you start there, it really does start to transform your business.
I do want to hear the picnic story, but maybe later. We'll
Well, listen, I'm a repository of what not to do, Andy, so anytime.
Yeah, I gotcha.
He's been doing it a long time.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Hey,
As if I didn't feel old enough already.
So the physical side is one thing, right? With guidelines and practices and human interaction and distancing and setting up your business and doing all the things that need to be done right now. Do you have any tips, best practices, do's, don'ts on the virtual side of this? for companies that need to be virtual, that, you know, want to get more productivity, either from a B2B or B2C perspective virtually?
Yeah, so it's a great question and very common today. I'm going to go back to something that we reinforced several times. 70% of what your people do at work is based on manager feedback. So if you just look at someone's job through that lens, whether they sit at a desk in front of you or whether they sit at a desk at home, if you apply that thinking to the way that you manage them, you can do amazing things with virtual workers, because it's very possible for you to give them much more frequent feedback than they get today in reviews. If you're on a Zoom call with them and a client and they do a great job, give them immediate feedback on that. There's a lot of ways that you can see the quality of their work, the decisions that they make, the fact that they show up for a 6 a.m. call or a 6 p.m. call, just those things, those behaviors that you want to reinforce, you can do that from anywhere. You don't have to be standing next to them to give them this type of coaching and feedback.
Yeah, so I think the message is in some aspects, the virtual aspect of our world today is more advantageous for feedback than, you know, the physical side, because you sometimes don't have the opportunity to go up to their desk or their office or whatever call. You just are not in that mode. But now you're on these calls, you're seeing somebody directly, and you could just say, hey, that was great. You know, let's do that again the exact same way 100 times now. You know, that's a good approach.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Matt, there's a question about transparency when it comes to the clients. We've been talking a lot about our communication to employees and what that looks like. And obviously we're dealing with a crisis right now. So what is the best policy when it comes to transparency with that's, you know, kind of a fair and accurate disclosure? This particular question is about COVID specifically. With the constraint in the community, how can businesses provide fair and accurate disclosure if there is a COVID matter in the business? And how can they say something without hurting it altogether? How can they talk to their people or their customers?
So that's a really good question. And my answer would be to follow to the letter the CDC and state of Arizona guidelines.
Absolutely.
Because those guidelines have been made very clear specifically for businesses, what to do if someone in your workplace tests positive, how to handle that situation. It is extremely clear. And we do see in some cases, businesses overreacting, going way further than those guidelines, way further than what would be necessary. And it's when we overcorrect or overreact that it could cause damage to the business long-term in the community. So if you follow those guidelines, and the state of Arizona has done a great job of providing clarity here too, you'll be able to be consistent with other businesses, and you'll also be able to maintain the public reputation that you've worked so hard to build.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. I think that answers the questions that we have so far.
Well, that's just fantastic. You guys have done such a great job, Tiffany and Matt. It's been phenomenal to hear from you. Maybe just some closing thoughts for the group. And we want to thank you again for joining us and providing such great information today on the ACA Bootcamp.
Thank you so much for having us, Andy. I would say the big thing, you know, Matt had summed up the key takeaways, and really that 70%, it really does come down to communication. And if that's communication with your consumers, communication with your employees, that is what can make the true difference in your business, is making sure you're talking to your employees and you're telling them thank you and good job when they've done the right thing, when those habits have been instilled and those behaviors are on point. So I think that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I think that's right, Tiffany. I would just add that, remind yourself when you write that 70% down that this isn't that hard to do. To go to where your employees are working and observe them and catch them doing things right is really powerful, free, and not very time consuming. So as soon as you can make that a habit, 66 days from now, take a look at your business and see how it looks then.
I really love that, Matt. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tiffany. And
Thank
you
you.
up front. You guys have done a great job. Really great information today. And thanks for everyone joining. And we'll hopefully see you back the rest of the week. We've got a great manufacturing presentation tomorrow and great topics coming up the next week too. So again, thank you for all of your hard work and leadership from up front. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Have a great day.
Thank you.